guys? Anthony here from DIYautotech, Automotive Diagnosis and Repair. Today we're in the shop. We're going to be working on this 2002 Toyota 4Runner behind me. We're going to be doing a timing belt, water pump, tensioner, idler pulleys, cam seals, and crank seals on this vehicle. So we're going to do a full service maintenance on this car, and we are going to be referring to the Toyota specific manual for this with all the torque specifications and the step-by-step process. There's going to be a couple tweaks here along the way, and you're going to want to stick around and watch the whole video because I'm going to highlight some really amazing tools that you're going to want to use for this job and other timing belt water pump jobs that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. Stick around, let's get to it. Alright, we're removing the front skid plate here. It's got like 6 or 8 bolts. A lot of them are going to be rusty, so you're going to want to hit it with some bolt penetrant before you do this, or get a little heat under there first. That'll make it a lot easier to do. Next, remove the radiator cap and make sure the engine is not hot. Now we're underneath the car and we're turning the petcock here under the radiator counterclockwise until it opens. And if you do unscrew it all the way, it will come out and you'll make a big mess like I do. So make sure you have a 5-gallon jug near you and ready to catch the radiator fluid. While the coolant is draining, go ahead and remove the overflow cap and hose. Okay, up here you're going to run into the problem of brittle plastic clips to get the grill off. There's 6 or 8 of these. You'll want a real thin, small, flathead screwdriver like this, and you're just going to push down on the clips like I'm doing here and help pull the grill out slowly. Be gentle here. Now with the coolant drained, you can go ahead and remove the upper and lower radiator hoses. If the hoses are stuck on there from years of use, you can go ahead and get a little pick tool like this and just go around gently. If you're replacing the hoses, you can go a little harder here because you're not going to reuse them, but don't push too hard because you can break the gooseneck off on the radiator, so just be wary of that. Want your 5-gallon bucket here because a little bit of fluid will come out from the lower radiator hose. Here I'm removing the clamp to the lower radiator hose where it connects to the water pump thermostat housing. And it is a little tight in there, so you might want to get a set of 90-degree needle nose pliers. That should help in that little spot right there because it is a bit tight. Okay, underneath the vehicle, the fan shroud comes in 2 parts, and I'm pointing here at the 2 plastic clips that need to come off, one on driver's side, one on passenger side. Your radiator is going to be held in with 4 bolts, and it's also hooked in, as you can see here. You're going to need to remove those 4 bolts. 3 of them are pretty easy to get to. This one down here is a little bit trickier, but you'll be able to access it with some proper tools. And here are those hooks that I'm talking about. You got 1 on each side. Fan shroud has 4 bolts that need to be removed along with the 2 clips previously, and that can get the fan shroud out of the way. Next up, you need to remove your transmission cooler inlet and return lines shown here. You'll most likely need your pick tool for these or a really small flathead screwdriver. Just be careful because you are going to reuse these lines. Have your catch basin ready to catch the transmission fluid that comes out of the lines. Couldn't get my pick tool in here, so I'm using a spark plug boot remover tool to loosen up the line. This is a little trick that you can use. Once it's loose, you can use a little bit of brute force to get that line off. again, be cautious, you're going to reuse these. Also need to unclamp the transmission line from the fan housing here, which I didn't show in video, and slowly remove the shroud as I did there. And next we're going to slowly remove the radiator out from its position, and be careful not to hit the fins on the fan or on the AC condenser. While it's out of the car, now is a really good time to clean that radiator out. So I'm using a garden hose here to clean the fins out, and I'll do the same to the AC condenser. Next, you're going to need some low profile box end wrenches or open end wrenches. As you can see here, my low profiles just weren't low profile enough. You've got 4 12mm bolts here that need to be removed in order to get the fan and clutch housing off from the motor. You'll need to place a pry bar of sorts in between the other side to hold it in place so that you can unbolt the fan and it not start spinning on you. Since my long box end wrenches were too short, I had to get creative using my short ones with a hammer. Not my best work. But look, you tap smoothly and carefully, and it is not a problem at all. We're not damaging any parts. Now, just remove it off of the motor. Now remove the cam position sensor switch here, which I apparently cannot do one-handed on camera. You're going to loosen 3 nuts and an adjuster on this power steering pump, and that'll loosen up the belt slack. We'll see that in the next few clips. Knuckle buster. Here's the 3rd bolt that's underneath the power steering pump, and it is connected to the adjuster, so you have to loosen this before you can pull the adjuster outward. I'm shining my light on the adjuster here. You can see the bolt sticking out. With everything loose, I'm backing out the adjuster by hand here. And that gives me enough room to remove the belt. We need to loosen the AC tensioner and idler pulley here with these 2 bolts. I am again here loosening it by hand to get it nice and loose. Even with mine fully loosened, it was almost rusted in place, so I had to get a pry bar just like this and move it up to get it out of the way. Just so you're aware, that is one trick that you can use. Now that that's loosened, you can go ahead and pry off the AC belt, which it still isn't the easiest one to get off because of placement, but you'll be able to get it off. Now on the alternator, we have the upper bolt and screen, the lower bolt, and the adjuster to the right. So we need to loosen up all 3 of those. Once you do that, you'll have plenty of wiggle room here to get the belt off. Now go ahead and pull your pulleys off here. Just note the orientation of how they're sitting on the motor. Now undo the little 6 or 8mm screw holding the oil dipstick tube in. Remove the clips for the spark plug wires from the upper timing cover. Also going to remove the vacuum tube here going to the air intake and get that out of the way. Okay, next you're going to unbolt the 6 bolts for the upper timing cover here. 2 of them are a little sneaky and on the lower portion of this upper timing cover, so just keep that in mind. Okay, before you tear this upper timing cover off, keep in mind there is still a wire connected on the inner aspect for the cam position sensor. So pull away slowly. On the inner aspect here, you can see the connector that I'm pushing out. And once we get that connector unclipped, then I can pull this upper timing cover completely out of the way, like so. Now undo the power steering pump bracket and adjuster as shown here. Now remove the 3 bolts that hold the fan bracket on. Be careful not to rip this thing off and send it flying right into your AC condenser. Now's a good time to check this bearing here for any free play or any roughness when spinning. To remove the crankshaft pulley on this car, you will need a special tool with these dowel pins. You can make one out of a 2x4, but it's not very sturdy. Crankshaft pulley bolt is held on to 217 foot-pounds, so keep that in mind. It's on there tight. Here I'm attaching about a 2-foot ratchet on the end of the tool, and it's butting up against the frame so that when I go to loosen the pulley bolt, the pulley cannot turn. Now I'm attaching my biggest 1/2-inch breaker bar here. Now I'm going to apply pressure here and loosen the bolt. There we go. That's all it took. Now here's a common problem. Crank pulley will be locked on the front of the motor. As you can see, I can't get it off easily here, so a nice rubber mallet will do the trick to help loosen it up a little bit. You don't want to pry on it with a pry bar because you might bend or break the tabs off. Keep at it and it will come off. Also want you guys to notice the little keyway here, and there is a dowel that matches up to that is on the crank arm itself. Now we got these 2 little bolts holding on this wiring loom that I'm pointing out with my flashlight that we need to unbolt. After that, we need to remove the 4 bolts shown here, holding the lower timing cover on. Here I'm lined up at top dead center with my timing marks all being at 12 o'clock straight up position on both upper cam pulleys. I've notched those timing marks with some bright marker to be more easy to view on the video. And here's a still clip of the crank timing pulley in the 12 o'clock position, lit up with some marker as well. Okay, now one of the bigger pains of this job is getting the timing belt tensioner out. There's 2 bolts. The front one's easy, and the back one's really hard to get out. To get it out, you're going to need a long 1/4-inch extension with a 1/4-inch U-joint adapter. And on that U-joint, you'll want to put some electrical tape around it to make it slightly stiff so that it's not too loose. By doing so, you'll be able to remove that back bolt out, okay? It's just sort of a pain in the butt. You got to access it from underneath by the oil pan. Once everything's top dead center in time, as you can see here, then we can go ahead and safely pull the old belt off. Okay, now you're going to want to use this cam pulley tool like I have here. I'll link it in the description below. And that's going to link up on the cam to hold it in place while we remove the center bolt, which is normally torqued to about 81 foot-pounds. There's also a little dowel that holds the cam in place, so take a look at it here on the screen because I didn't video it. The driver's side cam bolt was a lot tighter on my car, so I had to use a bigger impact to get it off, or a breaker bar would have worked fine too. This is just easier. And there it is. Now I'm going to remove this center idler pulley here. And then remove the couple of bolts holding the backing plate for the timing cover on. There's a couple of them here, and one of them holds the cam position sensor on. Now you want to remove the tensioner pulley. I pulled the pulley wheel off first. You don't have to do that, but you need to pull off this Allen bolt here. Be very careful with these. These Allen heads are notorious for stripping out, and you don't want that to happen. Not only do the Allen heads strip out, but they also pull threads out with them sometimes, and then you'll have to helicoil new threads into the block. So just be very careful when you're unscrewing these and screwing them back in. Make sure on the way out that you check the threads and you don't see any intermiddle threads in with the bolt. I somehow missed it on camera, but you're going to want to pull 3 bolts out here, and it might come out with the studs for the water pump thermostat housing. And now that the housing's out, you can go ahead and pull the thermostat out as well. Now that everything else is out of the way, we can go ahead and remove all the bolts that hold the water pump onto the block. This too might be sealed on quite a bit, so a nice little love tap will help get it off. Fortunately, not shown in the video here is that there is a coolant line connected on the side of the water pump here that needs to come off before you can pull the whole water pump assembly off. Now want to clean off the surface where the water pump sits. If there's a lot of debris or if there's any sort of gasket material left, you're going to want to scrape that off with either a plastic scraper or a razor blade, but you need to be very careful with the razor blades. Screenshot of the seal pulling tool that I'll link in the description below. This tool is absolutely vital in you getting the cam seals and crank seals out. Takes just a little bit of effort to slide the tool underneath the seal, and then you use the leverage of the arm in order to pop the seal out. You can see a nice little bump here, tap, 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 and it comes right out. Doing the same thing now just on the passenger side cam seal, and you can see just how quick this thing is at pulling the seals out. The crank seal was actually the easiest one to get out, in my opinion, even though there's less room to work down there. I'm going to use a plastic scraper here to clean up the water pump mating surface, and I'll make sure to hit this with some cleaner and degrease the whole area before I put the new seal on. And if your surface is really bad, you can use a metal tool like this, although you need to be much lighter when using tools like this. You don't want to gouge the metal. Look at all that crud. I'm going to apply a light coat of oil to both the inner and the outer raised surface of this seal, so that when I push them in, I don't scar them or put any scratches in them. I want them to go in smoothly.
Hi, I'm here.
It's crucial to gently finesse these new seals back on the cam plug here and not force them too much. Make sure that they're nice and flush here before pushing them in, and don't force them. Move slowly, just pushing them in as evenly as possible. If you don't have an expensive seal press, you can go with this method by just lightly tapping the seal in with either a socket or with a large size punch here. So I'm using a small hammer, a light punch, and I'm just barely tapping the seal in, just little bit by little bit at a time. I'm not pushing a lot at all, just very light taps here. And work nice and slowly until the seal is sitting flush like mine is here in the video. What's interesting was my driver's side seal actually went in really easily with just some heavy hand press with my thumbs. I didn't need to punch that one in. So each user may have a different experience on their own car. I just wanted to show you how mine went. But just to be safe, I did give it a few taps with the punch just to make sure it was set all the way home. Now with the crank seal, again the same thing applies. We push it in nice and flat, don't overwork it. And I'm doing a really light taps here with my punch just to make sure it's seated all the way home. And here's the final product of all 3 of the cam and crank seals installed. Here the Toyota OEM water pump and gasket is nice. It comes with a sealing surface that's already mounted onto it. And do note that that is single use. You can only torque that up once. I'm loosely installing that one side port coolant hose on there before I mount it onto the block. And I have one bolt already started into the gasket, so then I know at a minimum my gasket is going to be in the right spot at this one point. Now it's imperative that you go around and put all the bolts in by hand, hand tight. Do not use a ratchet, do not use an impact, do not cross thread your water pump bolts. Again, with the 90-degree needle nose pliers, I'm getting the clip back onto that side coolant port and getting that all situated. And now I'm going around in a star pattern and torquing my water pump bolts up to spec. Those bolts on my car are torqued to 14 foot-pounds per the Toyota manual, or 20 Newton meters. It's important when installing the thermostat that you install it with the jiggle valve downward at the 6 o'clock position per the Toyota manual. Clean off the thermostat housing as well. Make sure the mating surface is nice and clean before installing this, otherwise you'll have a coolant leak. And in my case, I had to go to the metal scraper because the plastic one just wasn't enough. Once it's cleaned up, go ahead and install the thermostat housing and bolt it up. These bolts are also 14 foot-pounds. Now that the water pump and thermostat housing is all torqued up, you can get the backing plate on for the timing cover here, and you can also put on the bolt to hold the cam position sensor in place. These bolts are super light, 80 inch-pounds, so we're going to torque these up. We're now going to put the little dowels back in place for the cams. Once those are both in, we'll go ahead and put the driver's side and passenger side cams back on. Now all you need to do is wiggle on the cam gears onto the end of the cam plug here, and they will pop right on, and then just go ahead and loosely thread your bolt in there. Got my cam pulley tool here resting against the block like this, and I'm going to take my torque wrench now, apply it, and crank this to 81 foot-pounds. Now we're going to install the idler pulley here, and again, hand tightening everything on it first as to not cross thread, and then we'll go ahead and torque that down to 30 foot-pounds. Now when installing the timing belt tensioner, make sure you leave the pin in, and you don't want to torque it in all the way. You only want to get those bolts in a couple of turns. So these bolts there, you only want to get in a couple of turns. Don't put them in all the way. Give yourself as much slack as possible. Now we'll take the timing belt tensioner pulley here and make sure that our washer is on the back. Okay, so we want to make sure our washer is on the back of the bolt here, and install that on the motor. This is also torqued to 30 foot-pounds, and be very, very cautious here. Hand thread it in first and only torque it once. And that plate washer I was talking about goes in between the tensioner pulley here and the motor. So the plate washer is in between the tensioner pulley and the motor. Next up, we'll slide our crank pulley back onto the crank here, and we got to line up the keyhole mark and slide it home. Okay guys, I split this up into 2 videos. Head to my channel and go watch the second video of this timing chain repair to show you the important stuff of how to set up Todd dead center, how to get the timing marks lined up, and how to get this all bolted back together and eventually get her running. If this video is helping you repair your car, please hit the like button and subscribe. That helps YouTube see that this is a worthy video for other DIY guys just like yourself. And anyways, we'll see you in the next video where we'll finish off this repair.